Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you all for being here. This is a great day. This is a beautiful facility, and we're really honored and proud to be here. I want to welcome our distinguished guests, students, residents of Harrisburg and the surrounding area. We're honored to have you with us because this is the first public meeting of the National Commission on Military, National, and Public Service. My name is Tom Kilgannon, and I will be your MC for this afternoon. And I have also the honor of being one of 11 individuals to serve on this commission, and I can tell you this is a great assignment. Not only do I have the privilege of working with an incredibly talented group of people, and my fellow commissioners are to my left and to my right, but they have dedicated their careers to making their communities and our country a better place to live. And as a group, we get to meet with inspiring individuals from all walks of life. The people we meet love this country so much, and they have so much respect for their fellow Americans. It's infectious, and you can't help but be inspired and want to expand that ethos of service. In a few moments, our chairman will tell you a little bit more about our mandate, but very simply, this commission was created by Congress to review the selective service system and develop recommendations that will lead to a greater ethos of service among our nation's citizens. By March of 2020, about 2 years from now, we will deliver to Congress and the President our recommendations to achieve those goals. But before we do, we need to ensure that those recommendations have been informed by a healthy and robust conversation with the American public. Simply put, we want to hear from you, your ideas, your suggestions, concerns, and solutions. And that's why we're here in Harrisburg. The people of this community throughout your history have made great contributions to our society, from the Industrial Revolution to the expansion of commerce and advances in agriculture. You've helped to build America's cities, and you produce leaders that keep our country strong and our communities safe. And today we ask for your help to start a potentially historic conversation. It's a conversation that begins in Harrisburg but will echo in every hamlet across the country. It's a dialogue that will explore the meaning and the value of service. In this discussion, we'll ask if the blessing of citizenship comes with an obligation of service. We'll explore the history and traditions of service that have made America unique and hopefully map a future in which every American is inspired and eager to serve. And there's no better way to kick off this conversation than to turn to a gentleman who has spent his career doing just that. He began his career as an inner-city teacher in Chicago and as a trainer for 2 Fortune 500 companies. He returned to education and served as president of Mount Hood Community College in Oregon and Lord Fairfax Community College in Virginia. Today he lends his leadership to Harrisburg Rotary and the boards within this community. He's the president of HAC and is known affectionately to all as Ski. Would you please welcome Dr. John Sabilski.
Good morning, everyone. We are delighted to see all of you at what we believe is our favorite community college. What we really like is that this is your first event of many, I know, over the next couple of years. And what's exciting is it is at a community college. There are 1,200 community colleges around the country, but no better place because we really do represent the community's interests. So for all of the staff, for all the commissioners, we really want to give you a warm Harrisburg and HAC welcome. We are the oldest, the largest, and what we believe the finest community college in the land, especially in Pennsylvania. I just wanted to very quickly say that for those of you who are in the audience, most of you are our neighbors. You know about this facility. This was a press building, a printing press building for many, many years, and we have moved many of our career technical programs into this building over those years. But for a college as the largest in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we have been committed to service for our military veterans especially. As you may have heard, our commissioners may have heard when you were touring the campus, We have the second largest group of students and their dependents who are vets studying here at the college, going after their 2-year degree and then moving on to a 4-year institution. We also have Vet Success. We are the only institution of higher ed in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to provide extra resources, counseling, benefit counseling, counseling in general to our veterans and their dependents. So we're very proud of that, and there are many other points. In public service, and the commissioners, I think, today interacted with some of our students from law enforcement, from fire, from EMS. We're very proud of, on that 14 acres near the Harrisburg campus, we have facilities there that train not only our firefighters and our law enforcement and EMS, but many others. Last year we were able to train 17,000 individuals through public safety, some form of public safety. 14 acres, we also have a 30,000 square foot firing range where we're training the best in the central Pennsylvania area. So it's really quite a complex that brings so many who are dedicated to public service, to this campus, to this area. And so we're just proud of all of that. But that's why there was such a good fit with what's going on today. We really are very, very pleased that we are the first in this process. We know that we set the bar very, very high. We hope that you'll come back once you realize no one will ever be able to get that bar that high again. But on behalf of our staff, I want to thank you very much for believing in us and having this first event here. We look forward to engaging our residents in this area and accomplishing your goals in finding out how we can continue to serve collectively and individually. So again, on behalf of our staff and the Board of Trustees, welcome.
Stay with me for just a moment because our chairman has a token of our appreciation for you. We're going to make you an honorary member of the commission with one of our lapel pins.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. Say, Noah and his team were very engaged in that, so I'll definitely share this with you, Noah.
And
split it in half.
And we've got some pins for them, too. Thank you very much. Thank you, Steve. In all seriousness, this facility, this institution, Dr. Ski and his team have been tremendously hospitable to us. We could not have held such a successful event without their cooperation. We want to thank everybody, and it's not possible to thank each of them individually, but there are a few people we'd like to give a shout out to, and I think Joe has a pin for each of them as well. Dr. Ski mentioned Noah Rufus-Abbey. Noah, are you here? Come on up here. Bob Stakem. Bob was with us on the bus this morning and showed us around campus. And Dean Myers, are you here? Dean, come on up. Let's give these folks a big round of applause. Thank you all very much. It's an incredible team that they have here. And our next speaker knows all about teamwork and has devoted his career to service, which began when he was commissioned through ROTC at the University of Notre Dame. Go Irish. He was an aviator in the Army, served in Europe, the Persian Gulf, Korea. He's a combat veteran of Operation Desert Storm and Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan, and he is now the director of the Joint Staff Headquarters, Pennsylvania National Guard. Would you please welcome Brigadier General David Wood.
It's great to be here. I do have to say, with the many soldiers and airmen that I work with, many of their children, many of themselves have gone to school here at HAC. I live down in Lancaster, and we have a great HAC campus down in Lancaster, and I really appreciate being here. It's great, and thank you for everything that HAC does. Chairman Heck, Dr. Sigilski, Commissioner Kilgannon, members of the commission, members of the panel here today, and ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to provide some remarks today as we discuss the importance of volunteering to serve our nation and build our future. Voluntary service is a cornerstone of America's democracy. Whether this service is through the military, through national service, or for public service through local government, academic institutions, and faith-based organizations, the foundation of this volunteerism sets the stage for the building blocks of our greatness in both the individual and in the organizations for which they serve. It's truly an honor to work with many brave men and women from all walks of life who have stepped forward to put the needs of others before their own. And we as a nation should celebrate all those who have served and continue to serve with honor and distinction. Each year, we set aside Veterans Day and Memorial Day to celebrate and pay tribute to America's veterans and those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice in defending our country. It might also be time to have a day that celebrates those who heed the wider call of service to country. The U.S. has been at war for more than 17 years, and we now have the largest population of young veterans since the Vietnam War. This population continues to grow, and we see men and women who transition from military service with skills and experience that have potential to impact both the public and private sectors. Many of these young veterans have the spirit of volunteerism and continue to serve in helping others. Recently, I had the privilege of awarding 2 Pennsylvania Guardsmen with the Octavius V. Cato Award for volunteerism to the community while recognizing and encouraging respect for individual diversity. Sergeant First Class Melissa Singer, a readiness NCO with the 28th Infantry Division right here in Harrisburg, was recognized for her founding of Operation Love Thy Neighbor, a small grassroots effort that reached out into the community to support elderly homeowners with chores and repairs that they could not afford to do themselves. She has led efforts on numerous fundraising activities from Wreaths Across America to Hurricane Harvey relief. Not only does Sergeant Singer contribute to her community through such fundraising efforts, she also volunteers her time at her local high school, where she is the unofficial photographer for the school sports teams, taking pictures and making video clips for family keepsakes and personal mementos. Her initiative and organizational skills make Sergeant Singer a true asset, not only for the 28th Infantry Division, but for the community in which she lives. Another soldier, Sergeant Laura Colvin, also distinguished herself with volunteerism worthy of the Cato Award. Sergeant Colvin, a water treatment NCO in the 128th Brigade Support Battalion, located out in Clearfield, Pennsylvania, prides herself as a servant leader. Having immigrated to the United States as a teen, she served as a young soldier on active duty, earned her citizenship, raised a family, completed an associate's, bachelor, and master's degree. After much deliberation, she re-enlisted again in the National Guard to complete her journey that she put on hold as a youngster. Over the past few years, Sergeant Colvin organized and volunteered for People in Need, a food assistance pantry for people who face mental health challenges in the greater Pittsburgh area. In addition, she coordinated the East Side Bread Basket Shelter, where she and her team provided food, clothing, as well as care and compassion to homeless in the community. Sergeant Colvin's work did not stop there. She also founded The Village, a community-based youth center for grades 9 to 12, which acts to counteract risk factors in order to enhance and improve our youth's quality of life and future goals. Such volunteerism is alive and well in our citizen soldiers and drives a sense of urgency to get things done. We should all strive to emulate this urgency. Military service has come a long way over the past decades. This summer, we marked the 45th anniversary of an all-volunteer military. And although we don't talk about it often, for 45 years we've counted on our all-volunteer military to deliver the stability and security that we need to have at home and abroad. But other ways of volunteering exist as well and are just as important to the vitality of our nation. The grassroots efforts of the 2 soldiers I just mentioned are where it starts. But the opportunities are not just in one's hometown. My own son volunteered for service in Peru through his university's Center for Social Concern. A good friend of mine's daughter has been serving in Thailand as a member of the Peace Corps. Another friend's son is serving with AmeriCorps National and Community Service Program in West Virginia. National service encompasses the broad spectrum of activity that is based on giving back to our nation. I like what you said, Tom, the blessings of citizenship. This service and sacrifice has built us up over more than 2 centuries as the great country which we are today. We are the world's indispensable nation, the land of the free, the home of the brave, and a beacon of hope for a troubled world. We must build upon this legacy by encouraging and espousing the benefits of service to the next generation of Americans that inherit this trust. It's an honor to do my small part in supporting the commission gathered here today to inspire Americans to serve. I'd like to truly thank the efforts of the commission and all of you that are gathered here today for taking the time to participate and contribute to this important discussion. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, General. Those are great stories, and it's very consistent with what we have seen and heard so far in our travels. That one type of service leads to another type of service, leads to a greater and a deeper appreciation for America and for all that this great country has to offer. So we appreciate you putting an exclamation point on that for us. And as I said, we want to hear from you. And on your chairs out there are comment cards. We're going to have the opportunity in a few moments to hear your comments and suggestions. But if for any reason you don't get to do so, or you have a thought tomorrow or the next day, please fill out one of those comment cards, leave them with our staff, send them into our office, or you can visit our website, which is up here on the screen, inspiretoserve.gov. Also, visit our Facebook and other social media, which is Inspire to Serve US. We value your input, and I can tell you that with the comments that we have already received, they get great attention from our commissioners. They're actually reading them, deliberating on them, giving them tremendous consideration. So if you would help us in this way, the quality of the recommendations we make down the road will be in part based on the feedback we get from you and others across this country. It's a broad mandate that we have, and it's a lot of work, and so we need somebody who's going to keep us on track and all moving in the right direction, and we're fortunate to have such a leader in the Commission's chairman. And he is somebody for whom this is not at all an academic exercise. Joe Heck has spent his entire adult life in the service to others. He was a member of Nevada State Senate and was a member of the U.S. House of Representatives for 3 terms. Dr. Heck is an active member of the United States Army Reserve. He holds the rank of Brigadier General and is currently assigned as the Deputy Joint Staff Surgeon at the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the President of Red Rock Government Relations. He is the chairman of our commission. I'm proud to serve with him. Will you please welcome Dr. Joe Heck.
Somebody took my clicker. Oh, there it is. Dr. Ski, General Wood, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend a little bit of time with us and learn about our commission, and more importantly, for us to learn from you. It's great for me to be in Harrisburg, as I was telling some folks throughout the day. I grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania, up in Pike County, graduate of Penn State, go Lions. So it's good to be back home. And it's really gratifying to have our first visit here. What I'm going to do over the next few minutes is, hopefully, give you an introduction to the National Commission on Military, National, and Public Service. And since we're at an academic institution, what I'm also calling Commission 101. So we are a nation that is built on service. If you think back, in this great Commonwealth, in 1736, Benjamin Franklin founded the first volunteer fire department. Volunteer service helped support America and our troops during the Revolutionary War. The 19th century saw the beginnings through faith-based organizations of important service programs that exist to this day, like the American Red Cross, United Way, and the YMCA. Service is a part of the American character. We might even say it's a defining quality of our civic responsibility and engagement, of what it means to be an American. You know, service means many things. For sure, it includes the work done by volunteers. But it also includes those who serve in the military. It includes school teachers, government employees, and others. Service is something that has had bipartisan support, not just today, but throughout our history. We can highlight efforts by every president, every administration, each political party to support the work that everyday Americans do to further the common good. Early in the last century, President Teddy Roosevelt founded the Conservation Corps. President Hoover used social service programs to help address poverty and other social ills. Various national service programs helped lead the country out of the Great Depression of the 1930s. President Kennedy founded the Peace Corps. President Johnson, the VISTA program. President George H.W. Bush started the Points of Light Foundation to encourage volunteerism. President Clinton created the Corporation for National and Community Service, which oversees the AmeriCorps and Senior Corps programs that we have today. And following September 11th, President George W. Bush encouraged all Americans to provide 2 years or 4,000 hours of volunteer service through their lifetime. Yet never before has our country blended together military, national, and public service into a unified effort. That brings me to the purpose of the National Commission on Military, National, and Public Service. The commission was conceived by Senator John McCain, Republican out of Arizona, and Senator Jack Reed, a Democrat out of Rhode Island. Senator McCain recently said that they created the commission to, and I quote, be a catalyst for an important national conversation on military and public service, end quote. It's a conversation that, again quoting Senator McCain, comes when our nation is at a crossroads. We must decide how we want to foster a culture of service among American men and women from all walks of life. Senator Reed recently expressed similar sentiments. He said that the importance of the Commission's work cannot be overstated. We as a government must invest in our public servants. This Commission's efforts will help develop effective ways to increase participation in military, national, and public service for both men and women, ultimately strengthening our communities and our nation. Now, we are indeed at a crossroads in our nation's history. Millions of American citizens volunteer and engage in service every day. Yet there is more we can do. More ways to participate, more ways to embed service into the very fabric of society. That's what the Commission is here to do. Our mandate is broad and aspirational, but we believe it can be a foundation for a movement. We intend to listen to the public, which is why we're here today, to learn from those who do and do not serve, and make recommendations to foster a greater ethos of service and strengthen American democracy. As our name suggests, the Commission will focus on 3 broad areas of service. The first is military service. So about 1.3 million Americans currently serve in active duty. You can add to that about another 1 million that serve in the active reserves or the National Guard. But taken together, that accounts for less than 1% of the total population. Add to this approximately 22 million veterans, including 940,000 from Pennsylvania. Taken together, about 9% of the U.S. adult population has served at some point in their life in uniform. But there is a growing disconnect between the military and the American people. You know, for an example, in 1995, 40% of youth aged 16 to 24 had a parent who had served in the military. Fast forward to 2016, that is now down to 15%. In addition, over the last decade, the number of youth that are both qualified for and eligible to serve and thinking about serving in the military has dramatically decreased. Next is national service. Service in federal, state, or local elected office or government employment. Currently, about 2 million Americans work for the federal government. Now, that number has been relatively constant for the past 20 years. But the percentage of Americans working for the federal government has dramatically decreased since World War II, from about 2.5% down to about 0.5%. What's more concerning is that of those 2 million who work for the federal government, only about 6% of them are under the age of 30. Many people also serve in state and local government employment. For instance, in Pennsylvania, it's about 72,000. Last, but just as important, is public service. Many Americans give back to their communities through different types of volunteer and government-sponsored programs, nonprofit and faith-based organizations, foundations, and private companies. In fact, 63 million Americans volunteer every year. But that represents only about a quarter of the total population. You've already heard mentioned today programs like AmeriCorps, Senior Corps, and the Peace Corps. These are programs run by the federal government, and there's about 60,000 Americans participating in those programs today. Now, in the last few slides, I discussed the decreasing or relatively low numbers of Americans that serve. In a country with a population of 325 million, we must do better. A little more than a quarter of the population, 90 million people, are 19 years of age or younger, the millennials and the Gen Zers. They represent a huge potential for the country if we can figure out ways to get more of them to serve. Additionally, over 48 million people are age 65 or older, comprising about 15% of the total population. This is a growing source of untapped potential. Today's seniors aren't retiring like ancestors. They have a strong desire to want to add value, and there's actually some research that shows the benefits, both from a health and social perspective, of being engaged in service programs. That brings me back to what the Commission is going to do over the next 2 years. The Commission will focus on 2 primary areas. The first is evaluation of the military selective service system, and if there is a continued need for the program in its current form, if there are any changes that are required, or if it should be disestablished. Now, most people have heard of the selective service system. The term is used synonymously with the draft. But it's important to know that those are 2 distinct and separate programs. One, the selective service system, is the actual registration of males between the ages of 18 and 25 in order to provide a ready pool of manpower to the armed forces in case of a national emergency. The other is the actual call-up, or the draft, of those within that pool. Now, registration is required by law, and there's penalties if you don't register. It's also important to know that currently there is no draft. In fact, the last draft was in 1973. Congress would have to pass legislation, and the President would have to sign it into law in order to authorize a draft. The second task that the Commission will undertake is exploring ways to increase an individual's desire and interest to serve across all forms of service. And we are particularly interested in understanding how Americans feel about service. We want to hear from people who serve and from people who don't serve, from people who want to serve but are unable to. And we want to hear from people that don't want to serve or don't think it's required. The Commission, as mentioned, is made up of 11 commissioners chosen by leaders in Congress from both parties and President Obama. They bring together diverse experiences from service in public office, the military, the federal government, and not-for-profit organizations. We are committed to a bipartisan approach to answer the essential questions on service that the Commission must address. Joining me in leadership of the Commission are 2 vice chairs. Mark Guerin, who's former director of the Peace Corps, oversees our work on national and public service. Mark, raise your hand. And Deborah Wada, who's the former Assistant Secretary of the Army for Manpower and Reserve Affairs, who oversees our work on military service. Throughout 2018 and 2019, the Commission will be visiting locations across the nation for a series of events and public conversations. The goal of these visits is to listen to the American public, to ignite a conversation, and to build a national movement around service. This is a big task. We need your help, which is why we're here. As has been mentioned, Harrisburg, you are our first visit. But we also plan to make visits to Colorado, Massachusetts, Florida, Iowa, Illinois, Texas, California, and Tennessee, and that's just this year. We hope this set of trips will enable our commissioners to hear from Americans representing the rich diversity of our country. As part of our work, the Commission will explore a series of key questions that are listed here and that we'll use to help guide our discussion later today. We are encouraging the public, as Tom mentioned, to submit comments, thoughts, and ideas on any aspect of the Commission's mission at our website, again, inspiredtoserve.gov, or on social media at InspiredToServeUS. And I would encourage anybody right now who's got a cell phone to either go on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram and like or follow us at InspiredToServeUS. We truly believe that working with all of you, we can sow the seeds of a movement that inspires more Americans to serve. Our vision, every American eager and inspired to serve. Because after all, we are a nation that is built on service.
So as you can see, these are big, challenging questions, complicated. And when Congress is faced with big, complicated, challenging questions, they create a commission and they say, you figure it out. And when a commission is faced with big, complicated problems and challenges, we turn to you, the American public, and we say, you figure it out. So that's what we're asking. Please give us your comments, your thoughts, your ideas on the issues and the challenges and the questions that Joe just outlined here. We want to hear from you, and we're going to do that in a few minutes. But before we do, we want to transition to a conversation with three dynamic individuals from whom we can learn a great deal. And to lead that discussion, I'd like to turn to one of my fellow commissioners who has served our country with distinction in a number of positions throughout her career in the highest levels of government and the national security apparatus. To see her accomplishments and credentials is to understand that she has developed an expertise on these issues that few others can match. But her humility is such that she always turns to others first to ask, what do you think? What can I learn from you? She is an incredible public servant and my fellow commissioner, Avril Haines. Avril.
Thank you for that kind introduction. Really is, nobody says it better than Tom and our chairman, but we are so happy to be here to have a chance to hear from all of you. And we thought we would start with three people from Pennsylvania who really embody essentially the kind of public service and the example that we're looking to try to emulate. And so let me just ask the panelists to come up. I'll start with the Secretary of the Department of Labor and Industry of Pennsylvania, Secretary Alexia. We're very, very pleased to have you. Please. And decades of public service and somebody who I think we can learn a tremendous amount from. Also, we have Abigail Whitecamp with us, who is a nursing student, but also is a Navy veteran and has remained in the Navy Reserves. We're so pleased to have you. Thank you so much. And finally, we have Tiffany Frank, who is an AmeriCorps Vista leader, who is from Pennsylvania, I believe grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, but actually did her first year for AmeriCorps in Wisconsin and is now here as a leader for Vista. Thank you so much. So we thought we would just start off really by asking you what it is that inspired you to serve. But I think if you have some opening remarks, particularly Secretary, if we start with you about PennServe and about the position here and how you look at public service, that would be terrific. Please.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Haynes, and thank you to all of you for being here, for the members of the Commission, for choosing to start in the Keystone State. We had a shout-out to Notre Dame and a shout-out to Penn State, so I'm from Philadelphia. We have to have a shout-out to the Super Bowl champion Eagles, and now we can be about our business. I have been honored to be asked by Governor Wolf to serve as the Secretary of Labor and Industry. I'm new at it. This is my 5th month. Before that, I had the opportunity to spend my career in education. I spent 32 years in the classroom, primarily as a special education teacher, working with middle school and high school students, some of whom had legal issues, some of whom had behavioral issues, mental health issues, and I tell people I loved every minute of it, but to be honest, I loved almost every minute of it. There were times. And then for the previous 10 years, before I became the Secretary of Labor and Industry, I was the president of the Pennsylvania State Education Association, the largest professional organization and largest labor union in the state. And I was honored to be asked by the governor to serve in the position I'm in now. And I guess I really, along the way, I never thought of what I did as service. I really thought of it as who I was and what mattered to me. I remember the first time I was really realized what I wanted to do. I was in an empty classroom, and I just could feel the opportunity that was there. And I've been honored to take that opportunity through to the point where I'm now the Secretary of Labor and Industry. One of the many things that our organization does is PennServe is part of who and what we are. We have a great group of folks, some of whom are here, who are AmeriCorps graduates, and we are able we have a board that looks at competitive grants and provides service and advice to folks from all over Pennsylvania who, they are coming to us with their ideas. We aren't saying, here's what we think you need to do. We listen to them and provide grants that will help them do some of the things they need to do. Just one quick stat I'm going to throw at you. With just a budget of $250,000 from the state, we are able to leverage those funds into over $21 million in federal funds and private sources of funds. $250,000 to $21 million, and we're very excited about that. That's $1 state dollars, $1 of state money that's invested will give us $84 that we can then put back into the communities that we serve. So that's kind of the overarching look at what we do and how I sort of got into this.
It's wonderful. Please, Abigail. Do you want to talk about just what inspired you to serve and how you came to serve in the Navy?
Oh, sure. So when I graduated high school in 2009 from Cumberland Valley, and my sister, she's about 5 or 6 years older than me, and she had joined the Coast Guard as soon as she graduated. So I kind of always grew up knowing that was an option for me. It wasn't until 2012 that I wanted to make good on that option, and I first tried the Air Force, but it didn't work out. I have tattoos, so they're pretty strict on that policy. So,
barrier to service, got it.
But the Navy was more than happy to take me, so go figure, right? So I joined the Navy in 2012 as a sonar technician. I served 4 years on a destroyer in Hawaii, which was just amazing. Couldn't have picked a better duty station. And then I came back home to then start attending nursing school. I'd worked at Harrisburg Hospital previously to joining the Navy, and realized that I really want to be a nurse, but that nursing school is expensive. So I knew about the GI Bill because of my sister. She actually graduated from UConn up north.
And is that part of what incentivized you to go to the Navy also?
Absolutely.
Knowing that would be available to you afterwards?
Yes, that, and I realized I had a little bit of growing up to do, and military structure definitely provides that. So that was definitely what inspired me to join, and I ended up getting so much more out of it than I ever expected. Just being a part of the community and giving back was, I didn't expect to gain that type of appreciation. So.
Yeah, very nice. Tiffany, talk about how you came to AmeriCorps and what the path was.
Sure, yeah. So hi, I'm Tiffany. I'm currently serving as a VISTA leader with the Community Action Association of Pennsylvania. I just want to start by saying that growing up, service was instilled in me, and I didn't know that it could be different than that. I come from a family of educators, healthcare professionals. My grandfather, great uncle, my father are all veterans. Being a dependent of a disabled veteran, I also benefited from the GI Bill, which was a huge asset in my education and getting myself to where I am today. But I was completing graduate school, and I was working toward moving internationally to work with an organization for 2 years as a part of that program, and everything fell through at the last moment, so that was exciting. I had to scramble to find something else to fulfill those requirements, and that's when I remembered that a friend of mine from my same program was looking at AmeriCorps positions. So I was like, oh, I think I've heard of this organization before. Let me look into this. And as I looked into it, I realized I could search for opportunities to serve by location, tons of different focus areas, things I was interested in, skills I had already that organizations were looking for. And that just opened up a whole host of opportunities to pretty much the whole United States was just my game board. And as long as someone wanted me and I wanted to go to them, that could happen. And that's how I found myself in the matter of a couple weeks accepting an AmeriCorps Vista position with the Habitat for Humanity in Wisconsin. Drove myself across 6 states and served there for a whole year doing outreach, faith communications, volunteer assistance, grant writing, anything they needed that would not only help them but expand my professional goals. That's what I did. And then after a year, as much as I love traveling and going around, my family is in Pennsylvania, born and raised in Ephrata, so I wanted to come home. I was looking at doing another year of Vista because I thankfully had a support network that would allow me to do a second year with minimal income. If I had not had that support network, that would have been a huge issue for me. I inquired about some Vista positions which were already filled, and I was super bummed because they were exciting, and the ladies that we have working on them now are just phenomenal and are doing so much good in those positions. But that's when they were like, hey, we need a Vista leader. You're qualified. We like you. Come help us. And so that's how I found myself there, and I'm currently in my 3rd month of being a Vista leader and loving it.
Tiffany, can you just talk a little bit about what it means to be a Vista leader, what you're doing in that role?
Sure. So as a Vista leader, you have to have successfully completed an AmeriCorps term of service or a Peace Corps term of service. So you already have a background, at least generally. You don't have to be a Vista, but you can before that. But you have a working knowledge of a service program. And so a lot of my day in, day out stuff is just making sure that the Vistas that we have, so I'm currently kind of supporting 10 different Vistas in 7 different sites across Pennsylvania, some of which I get to be local to, and others of which I only communicate via phone, email, things like that. So if they need things, if situations arise, they want additional professional development help or researching information that they're just swamped with what they're doing. Hey, I'm trying to write this grant, I need some help, or anything like that. As well as now that a lot of the Vistas that I'm supporting right now are thinking about what's next in their future. I'm going to play a large role in assisting them in figuring out what's next, how do I get there, and just really, I'm just a huge advocate for them as well as a support system.
That's great. Secretary, I was wondering, you work with a lot of, obviously, the private sector in your job and think about these issues, and I was wondering, how do you see them playing a role in public service and what they can get out of public service, the extent to which they can encourage that or take advantage of people who have engaged in public service and hire them out?
I think that, first of all, the skills that people learn through volunteering and through public service are it's just incredible. And one of the things I learned as an educator was that I had skills that I didn't realize I had until I got the opportunity to use them somewhere else. But I see it with my own children, the skills that they've learned. All 3 of them have been involved in volunteer work. One of them, that's her job now. She works for a nonprofit in the Philadelphia and D.C. area. And just what are traditionally called the soft skills of working together, problem solving, coming in with your day planned, and then you find out that's not what your day is going to be. All these things. And the compassion that people learn, I think, in the service work that they do. These are skills that matter to private industry. Obviously, there are the, quote, hard skills, STEM, for example, that Governor Wolf is very committed to here in Pennsylvania. His PA Smart initiative puts a lot of money into STEM work and workforce development and apprenticeships and those sorts of things. But the skills that you can learn through volunteering are very valuable to private industry. And I think when we talk to folks, the tax structure matters and infrastructure matters, but they want to know. Tell us what's your workforce like? What are the people here like? And particularly in Pennsylvania, when industries do come here, they're pleasantly surprised. Not surprised, they're happy. They're very happy to be here. So the skills that are learned really do pay off for private industry. And what the responsibility we have as a state and as Department of Labor and Industry, and I'm looking at Maureen, who heads our PennServe program, is to tell our story, to make sure that the great work that we do through our PennServe program and through AmeriCorps, that story is told to people throughout the Commonwealth.
Yeah. I'm struck listening to many of the people that have served in your state by not only do they talk about the service that they're doing and the impact that's having on the community, but also the impact on them, in a sense, and the value they receive from it. And I was wondering, Abigail, what you see as being the benefit of service in your life, what sort of values or other experiences you've had that have made it important. And I'm told, by the way, that people are having sometimes a little trouble hearing people, so just speak closer to the microphone. That would be useful.
Sure. I really can't say enough good things about joining the military. It allowed me to be a part of a group of people, a team. Growing up, I played a lot of team sports. I was in softball for, 11 years. And I really, graduating then from high school, I missed that team environment. And so then joining the military really gave me that back. And we did a lot of volunteering when we would go on our deployments. We volunteered at an orphanage in South Korea. And also like a ASPCA in South Korea also, dealing with their pets, and it was so rewarding to help the local people there, and then we're like transitioning then into a healthcare environment. That's something I'm really eager to get back into. Just have to be patient, get through school, but then I'm excited to then go and help, and feeling needed is really important to me.
That's wonderful. One of the things that I wanted to ask each of you is, do you have any advice to us as we're thinking about recommendations for how to increase the propensity to serve, looking, for Abigail and Tiffany in particular, your friends that maybe you think would be wonderful in service but didn't necessarily take that path, or what you perceive to be the barriers under certain circumstances. Anything that you think you want to comment on the Commission's work, and I'll let the Secretary have the last word on this, figuring for the chance. But Tiffany, do you want to start?
Sure. So I think even just in my experience, and some of it perhaps as a result of just my social network and where I grew up and the things I was involved in. But a lot of my peers, those a little older than me, a little younger, I genuinely believe that the majority of them, they want to make a difference and they want to serve in some capacity. And I think some of that is, they do volunteer work here and there or through college or things like that. And that's phenomenal. That's not to discredit any of it. But I don't think there's enough necessarily conversation going on, particularly when they're younger, middle school, high school, or even college, going through that. Like, what does it mean to serve? It's not just the military, and that's not to discredit any of that. Like I said, I come from a family of veterans, but that there are other ways to serve, and those that, I can serve and I can make my country stronger and better while also learning more about myself. People are trying to tie in volunteer work with their professional goals, and they don't have to be a separate thing anymore, and I think that my generation is trying to do that no matter where they find themselves going into, the public sector, the private sector, and I think being able to grasp onto that movement, particularly when they're younger, would just be such a beneficial thing, because I know that there are lots of barriers and there are things to consider, particularly finances and what you have to live off of, and if you don't have strong social networks of people who could help support you through a year of service when you're living on a small living stipend, that's really hard to consider, and sometimes it's forcing people into figuring out, do I want to go and feel like I'm making a difference in doing this act of service, or do I want to feed myself, or maybe I have kids already, things like that. And I know that throwing money at the situation isn't always the answer. It's just not there and able to significantly increase our living stipends. But there might be other ways in which we can support young people, whether it's continued professional development, things like that, where you're not necessarily getting a monetary value directly handed to you, but it's going to boost you throughout your whole career. And I think that can start from the very beginning.
Yeah, so education and support, and also looking at financial rewards in some circumstances, but that's not the whole story.
Right. I know, one of the main factors for me, in addition to coming home to my family to continue with another year of service, was that I could receive a second year of the education award. I have student loans from my graduate school, which is how I got into service anyway, so it's this weird circle that I found myself in. But knowing that I could put my loans into forbearance, and that that interest payment would be made on my behalf, and I still have tax obligations, things like that, but the amount of money that's being given to me that can go directly towards either continuing my education or paying off the debts that I have, that absolutely sealed the deal for me, because this is where my heart was, this is where I wanted to be, and having that piece attached to the service, it made all the difference, really. Yeah.
Abigail.
I know I'm just going to speak from the military standpoint. When I was in high school, I remember, heading to the cafeteria, and there would be, these various tables, and each branch of the military would have their own table, and they would be speaking about the benefits of joining. I very rarely saw anybody go up and ask and talk to them, and myself included, I didn't, because I didn't think that was my plan. I think just getting the information out there is the biggest thing, because when I go and in classes now and I talk to other students and they say, oh, you don't work after school and you have your own apartment and everything, how are you able to afford all of that? And it's because of the GI Bill, because I'm getting, I'm attending school full time and getting the monthly stipend, that I'm able to do that, and then I'm able to focus on my schoolwork. So I don't need to go from school to then work. I could if I chose to, but the fact that that's a choice is just, it's amazing. But they're always surprised, because they didn't maybe understand that they could get paid to go to school if they just serve 4 years in the military. So I think just getting the information out there and letting people in high school who are about to graduate that this is an option for them, and maybe kind of marketing it in a way that if you're not ready to go to college yet, if you're just you don't feel you're mature enough to handle the course load of being a full-time college student, then do 4 years, travel, get some life experience, and then come to college. So.
There are very real and practical things that, as policymakers and as legislators, we could do, some of which you've heard, so it's nice to go last because some of those ideas have been expressed. But things like loan forgiveness, or partial loan forgiveness for service that's done. Hiring preferences. Many places have hiring preferences for veterans, and that's great, but as we know the Commission is well aware, there's more to service. And so hiring preferences for people that have gone through AmeriCorps, who have provided service to their community. Mentorship opportunities, making sure that there are opportunities that corporations and private industry is ready to provide mentorship opportunities for folks who are coming from volunteer positions. A lot of corporations I know they'll lend executives to nonprofit organizations, and it would be great to find those folks in your companies who have done service and it really matters to them, and they're anxious to get out there and give back to the community. So there are really practical things that as private industry and as decision makers, policy makers, that we can do to help encourage and incentivize folks to, as we've heard, take advantage of the opportunities that are there.
Yeah, what a remarkable panel. And Secretary, also just by your leadership, spending your time with us today, talking about these issues, your decades of service, I think say a lot on their own. So I really appreciate the time. But all three of you, just so impressive, and really thank you for coming and talking to us. So let's give them a hand. We're going to open it up now for comments, public comments, and it's our opportunity to hear from all of you. I think there are just a few things we want to say. One is everybody is welcome to comment, and as was indicated earlier by Commissioner Kilgannon, there is our website here in case you don't have a chance to say something or you think of something after you leave the room that you want to give up. There's also our social media tag, but we really do hope that you talk to us now and that you have an opportunity to say something now. We'd also just ask that you try to limit your remarks to 2 minutes, just to give as many people a chance to talk as possible, if you can. And then finally, we've got a colleague, I think Amy is going to be here, so see her holding her hand up. She's got a microphone, and so we'll bring that around to people who want to say something. And we just encourage you to talk to us, tell us about your own experiences in service, or give us some advice about some of the issues that have been raised for the Commission, whatever it is that you think is appropriate. We'd like to hear from you. So we'll start. Anybody just want to say anything, please just raise your hand. Oh, terrific. This gentleman over here.
Hello, my name is Casey Bridgeford. I'm with the Harrisburg Housing Authority, and I serve residents, public housing residents, as well as Section 8 residents in the city of Harrisburg. And before that, I was a part of the founding team of an AmeriCorps program in Indianapolis, Indiana, called Public Allies. And what I've noticed in the residents that we serve here, as well as the young people that I served as a program manager for Public Allies, is number one, that people from inner city backgrounds many times don't have the opportunities to have formalized service. Though they may serve in other ways, they may serve at their church, they may serve in their community, these informal ways that they offer service maybe may not be recognized, but they don't have some of the more formalized ways. But then even when given the opportunity, in my time with Public Allies, I noticed that young people that came from low-income backgrounds and other at-risk backgrounds really had the opportunity to serve, but didn't really have the opportunity to be supported in their service. So we saw two kinds of people. One group of young people that came from more affluent backgrounds and actually had to become poor to serve, so this was their first time interacting with social services such as food stamps and other services, so they had to go from being affluent to being poor just to be able to serve. Then young people who were already poor weren't able to make it through the program because there wasn't enough support for them. So my question is, what can we do to add more support, such as increasing the amount of stipends, giving, when do we start looking at national service in AmeriCorps programs the same way that we look at military service, and extending things like the GI Bill to those who serve in our local communities to make sure they're still able to live, pay their bills, and do a great work in the community.
Thank you very much. Very much in line with one of the things that I think the Secretary noted earlier on. There's someone right here. Right here, please.
I'm the director of Quaker House in Fayetteville, North Carolina. We're there because Fort Bragg is there, and we've been there for almost 50 years. I want you to know that my comments come from a feeling of love, and that's why I serve with Quaker House, is because we love the military community. We love the people who are there. I grew up in a military family. My father was career Air Force. My brother was a Marine Reservist, and my son-in-law was in the National Guard. But my comments do have to do with the work you're doing on the selective service and how that might transition into any draft. For the selective service, we feel it's very important that people be able to self-designate as conscientious objectors. I think this is a hallmark to our national outlook on peace, and that peace should be recognized as an option, and it's not an option when they register with the selective service. Our second concern is with the draft. If it ever did come back up, that it be overseeing any conscientious objectors and alternative service would be overseen by a civil agency and not through a military chain of command. There are many conscientious objectors who feel so strongly that they will not serve in any alternative service either that goes through a military chain of command. They will rather go to jail. And if you look at the history through World War I and World War II, they would even suffer any kind of abuse rather than serve under a military command. But these same individuals have a very strong ethos of service, a very strong willingness to go into danger, to serve in a medical capacity, an emergency medical capacity, and throwing them in jail is a waste of that service. And so I would ask you to consider that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now, I have been a volunteer at the VA in Lebanon for the past 15 years. My primary responsibility is as a patient companion, but I think I can speak for all 450 to 500 of us to say that being a volunteer at the VA is one way of saying to every patient that we come across, including staff who are veterans, to say thank you for your service. The best practical purpose for the volunteers is to support staff. If you can imagine that many people, if they would disappear, staff is stretched tight as banjo strings anyway, and still give the best possible care to our veterans. And the jobs that volunteers at the VA give can be anything from back office jobs to holding hands with veterans who are dying, to going with a group to play bingo on the weekends. There's just any number of jobs that can be done, but all of it is very important because our veterans are that important. And many who have been injured way back when, whether it's World War II, Vietnam, Korea, the Gulf War, any of those, as they get older and older, some of the initial injuries that they received somehow come back to haunt them, especially when they're much older, especially with the Vietnam era, the Agent Orange people. So we see more and more of these people that we can not only entertain or help or keep company, but say thank you for your service.
My name is Jay Stanton, and my father-in-law's last few weeks were with you in Lebanon, and I appreciate that. Thank you. I come from a family that has a lot of service in it. My father taught ag under the GI Bill back in the 50s. My mother was on the school board for many years, giving back to the community. I have an older brother who has been a township commissioner for many years, still is, for about 30, 40 years in his township. I have a brother who has been on the fire department and the rescue squad for many years in his township. And my wife has worked for the last 35 years for a Masonic organization, one of the large organizations that gives back money to the Muscular Dystrophy Association. I started as a high school teacher, and when I was a teacher, what I did was I got myself on the local municipal board for a couple years. When I retired from teaching, I worked for 25 years in business. I was very, very busy, couldn't do anything with the community. When I retired, I have time to give back to my community, so I joined a lot of organizations. I'm a member of the community foundation. I drive the Elder Express in our little town, Hummel's Town, right down the road here. I'm on the Shade Tree Commission. I'm a master gardener. A lot of things like that I give back to our community because now I can afford it. I'm retired, and I enjoy it like that. My two kids, I have a son and daughter, both have family. They are so busy with my 7 grandkids. They don't have any time to do that. But perhaps when they retire, they will, because maybe they've learned that from people like me and my mother and my brothers doing that. So I think giving back to your community through service is something really, really worthwhile, and I enjoy doing it. The people who I serve, they appreciate us, because we're a bunch of volunteers who do that mostly for the older people in our town. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kat Royer. I'm an AmeriCorps program director for the Olivet Boys and Girls Club in Reading, Pennsylvania. So we have AmeriCorps members that serve at our various club locations in the city of Reading, and they help support after-school programming for our youth. So first, just about me personally, I'm an AmeriCorps alum. I served in Camden, New Jersey for a year, and I think one of the biggest things for me that I still carry with me today is learning other people's stories from my service, stories that were very different from my own. So I was a health coach in the city of Camden. I helped people who were chronically ill access health care, connect them to community resources. So, one of the things that I learned is, someone might be winding up in the ER time and time again because of their unmanaged diabetes, because they're homeless and they don't have a place to store their insulin. So I think that's something that I still carry with me today. And also just the experience of experiencing the system from their perspective and understanding how it might be failing them and understanding the ways that we might be able to fix it. So that was really powerful for me. I also want to point out our AmeriCorps member, Hernan, who's with me today. I'm really proud of him. I love him for him to speak about his service. He has served 3 terms with us. He grew up as a club kid going to the Olivet Boys and Girls Club. Now he's older, and he's giving back. So I just want him to speak.
Hi, again, my name is Hernan Bertrand, and I grew up in a home where I didn't know about the Olivet Boys and Girls Club. So when I was like 12 or 13 years old, I started going to the club and being a member. And now that I'm actually a AmeriCorps member, I'm giving back to what they gave to me. And what I do is I run a reading program called Kids Lit. And what I do is I read to them, and I actually help them with their reading if they actually need help. And so I do that like 3 times a week. And I do ages 6 and 7 and 8 and 9-year-olds. I meet with them and I read to them. And other stuff that I do is I help with homework. And now that I'm actually a AmeriCorps member, I'm actually happy that I'm doing this, because whenever I go to the club, all the kids look up to me, and it's really important that I do this for them. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Maureen Eccleston. I'm the Executive Director of PennServe, the state commission here in Harrisburg, and I want to thank you for making your first trip here to Pennsylvania. I also want to echo some of what we've heard today to Casey Bridgeford bringing up ideas of equity in service. This is an area we desperately need to look at to ensure that everyone truly does have an opportunity to serve. And I think one of the ways that we increase access to service, quite frankly, is having more service opportunities. There are many communities where individuals grow up seeing AmeriCorps members, seeing members of the military. We heard that from Abigail. We heard that from Tiffany, that they knew how to access these service experiences because they had a friend or family member who was doing it. If we don't have individuals in our communities who are already serving, we lose out on that because we only get so many folks who go up to those people in the cafeteria, right? So in 2009, as you know, the Serve America Act passed, and we were supposed to see AmeriCorps grow to 250,000 AmeriCorps members a year. And we haven't seen that grow by even one. We've maintained flat. We need more service opportunities so that we can have more service opportunities. It's an easy snowball effect. And so I think we need to consider issues of equity. We also really need to ensure that we are, frankly, increasing the opportunity of individuals to serve, particularly in our rural and our underserved urban communities. Thank you again for being here.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Monahan. I'm the Chief Service Officer for the City of Philadelphia. Thank you for being in Pennsylvania first and for having us here today. I'm really excited that this conversation is going on. So I've been in my position for 2 years, and I strongly believe that at the municipal level, that engaging residents in service is key to solving the challenges that we're experiencing. And in my 2 years, the thing that I found is people want to serve. It's really about lowering the barriers to entry, and I think what Maureen talks about is so true. If we had more, I think about summer vistas, actually. I think that, or summer associates. I think it's such a great example because the money that's left over, sometimes we get these extra positions, and it's a great way that we can bring in maybe students that are just out of high school, and we can give them a little taste of what service is like. And often we can use these for positions that maybe these are people who never would have considered that before. I also want to say, as in the city of Philadelphia, to Tiffany's point, I've also seen that young people really want to serve, but one of the challenges is how do we find an opportunity? So we have a special admit process in the city of Philadelphia. We have schools that students can apply to. They have different focuses, and they're public schools. And one of the things that those public schools look for is service. And students start applying to these schools sometimes in 5th grade. But it's really hard for a 12-year-old to find a service opportunity, right? All these applications ask, where are you serving? And these students are like, well, I would love to serve. Where can I serve? So my office has been focusing on a program. Jeanette back there works in my office, and she's fabulous. We've been working on a program called Summer of Service for this summer, where we're going to be just putting all that information in one place and then saying, like, once a week, here's a highlighted opportunity that's great for young people so that it's easy for people to find. And I think just having anyone who's putting that information in an easy place, I think really makes a big difference because people want to serve. It's just when it's hard to figure out how, I think people get discouraged or they get distracted or they go do something else. So I really do think it's incumbent on us to figure out who's doing that, who's making that information centralized. And then just one other quick thing. The secretary spoke about the corporate community. We have a corporate volunteer council in Philadelphia, and I have had the distinct honor of seeing how committed parts of the corporate community really are to investing in really smart ways to help support communities. Impact 2030 is an initiative through the United Nations. If you're not familiar with it, I would strongly suggest that you get to know it. through that initiative, I have had the opportunity to work with some corporations in Philadelphia to do some really significant work. For example, IBM wanted to put 100 IBMers once a week into after-school programs to teach STEM and robotics. And all of that happened because of Impact 2030. So I think there's some things out there that if people know about them, it makes these connections. And, it's just they didn't have an entry point into the city, right? Like, how do we actually get in? So I think that if we can provide those points, that we're going to get a lot more people serving in ways that are outcomes-based and recurring and can start to solve the challenges that we have. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Titus Peachy. I live in Lancaster, and I really want to thank the Commission for taking time to travel the country and listen. I'm sure you'll have many rich conversations. I wish I could hear all of them. I grew up in a Mennonite household and church that taught the way of peace and nonviolence as an integral part of our faith commitments. Our ultimate loyalty was to God and the worldwide community of faith. And with that belief, we believed that war violated the very purpose for which we lived, to nurture and respect the image of God in each human being, and to build communities of peace that broke down the walls built by nationalism, racism, and economic disparity. So with these convictions deep inside of me, I dropped out of college in 1970, and I went to Vietnam to perform 3 years of alternative service as a conscientious objector to war under the auspices of the Mennonite Church. This I did voluntarily because I had actually failed my physical exam and was not required to go, which really confused my draft board, as you might imagine. But I was not alone. I served alongside dozens of other conscientious objectors, most of whom had been drafted, but who also volunteered to serve in Vietnam. And this also included many young women who, of course, were not drafted, but volunteered to serve in Vietnam. And they did this as an expression of their commitments to service and peace. So from these experiences, I offer just a few comments on service. One, I think the most meaningful service is voluntary, not mandatory. Secondly, I would plead that the rights and convictions of conscientious objectors be respected in whatever grows out of this commission. Conscientious objectors to war are willing to serve in difficult and dangerous places, and I think can make significant contributions to the peaceful and secure world that we all desire. And third, I think the present-day requirement to register with selective service should be abandoned, as it only exists to support a potential return to mandatory conscription, which I oppose. It also creates additional burdens for some conscientious objectors who cannot cooperate with a system that would send conscripts to war. So in summary, I support incentivizing voluntary, peaceful service under civilian direction. And as we've all heard, this already exists in many forms, so I would plead that we expand it greatly and create a culture of voluntary service. Thank you for listening.
Hi, my name is Megan Tetro. I am currently serving as a Pennsylvania Campus Compact AmeriCorps Vista in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. My site of service is with Franklin and Marshall College and the Refugee Center and Community School in Reynolds Middle School. And I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of how I came to service, and I think that there's some things to learn when hoping to engage with more young people in the future. I graduated from Southern Connecticut State University in May of 2017, so almost a year ago. And a year ago at this time, I was kind of having this moment where I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm graduating. I had a degree in business, but I didn't want to go into the private sector, so I was like, now what? And on a Google search, by chance, I found AmeriCorps, and one thing led to another, and here I am today. But I think that there's this huge potential to recruit more young people as they're exiting college or thinking about entering college, because there's so much ability to develop professionally and personally being in a year of service as a Vista. So I would encourage more presence on college campuses and things like that. And then also, as a second point, in my year as a Vista, I'm lucky enough to be a part of a cohort with Pennsylvania Campus Compact, and I think that the support of agencies like PAC could be considered as you're developing your recommendation, because moving to Pennsylvania from Connecticut was kind of a big move, and I think it would have been a lot more difficult learning how to handle a Vista Living stipend and navigating certain systems and how to handle certain procedures without the support of the cohort and the professional development that they also provide in addition to the CNCS. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Brandon Datesman. I'm the director of the PAC Vista program that Megan just spoke so eloquently about. So, like she said, it's a great opportunity to recruit folks coming out of college and continue on a path into service thereafter. And something that Pennsylvania Campus Compact has been able to participate in the past that no longer exists is something called Learn and Serve, which was a program through CNCS. And this grant allowed us to train faculty and students on service learning curriculum on campuses. And this kind of created a trajectory of service when they graduated. And that's something I would encourage the Commission to explore bringing back into the world of national service, because as you can see, these vistas are very inspiring, and I think having more conversations of service with students on college campuses can inspire more service. We actually have with us today someone, Raquel, right here, working with one of our vistas, who's thinking about serving herself because she's worked so closely with our vista and has been inspired by our vista, Gina, who's right behind me. So that's my piece. Thank you so much.
We have a question over here.
Thanks. My name is Dravidi Stinnett, and right now I work at the Department of Justice. But prior to that, I was a Repair the World Fellow. The reason I'm here today is that I wanted to make sure that when you consider your recommendations, that you consider increasing accessibility when it comes to volunteer opportunities and engaging those communities. Oftentimes I see, like, there'll be a volunteer opportunity, you get there, and they didn't think about you. Like, there might be some stairs or a thing that you can't do, but I can say for myself as a person with a disability, quick thinking, and you're able to kind of navigate that, but sometimes I think people just want to be able to participate. And even when I got the opportunity to volunteer for FEMA at the federal level also, that intentionality about people with disabilities and being accessible places wasn't there. So I just want to make sure that you consider those things, because there's a whole community of people that want to serve, can serve, and be innovative that aren't even being communicated with. So that was just the thing I wanted to share today.
Good afternoon, folks. My name is Jeanette Bovligancy, and I work at the Office of Civic Engagement and Volunteer Service with Stephanie and Claire, who's our amazing Vista leader, the AmeriCorps Vista program there. I just have a comment about not forgetting about our immigrant community. My father came to the United States in 1970 from Kinshasa, which is the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and I think we often forget that there are a few groups that understand the American dream, like the immigrant community, and what that means to give and serve and appreciate what it is that we have here in the country. And I think we oftentimes overlook that community because there are other struggles that they're dealing with when they get here. But I think engaging them and making sure that we don't forget the beautiful experiences that they have coming from other countries all over the world can be very beneficial to our service community. So just wanted to bring that up.
Another question back here. Stephen has a question about awareness.
Hi, my name is Stephen Goebel. I served from 2015 to 2016 with Keys AmeriCorps in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm actually a New York native originally, so for me that was a big change. I lived in Harrisburg for the last year and a half, and one of the things that I wanted to just mention is I think the awareness of how people can serve is a big obstacle. When I was serving in Pittsburgh, our main goal was helping kids, just empowering them to be successful. I worked in an after-school program, and we would hear a lot of different issues that they would have to go through. conflicts with family, not having enough food, those kinds of issues. And I think that is a big avenue that could be explored in terms of service, especially for younger people who, quite frankly, just want to help out in our society. Right now I work in Dauphin County helping find supports for people with intellectual disabilities, and I just want to say that in regards to them, one of the things that I hear across the board is there aren't a lot of opportunities for them to feel like they are serving the people that they live around. So I just wanted to say I think the biggest disservice we can do is limiting who we think can serve and limiting the definition of what we think service is. So, thank you.
Was there one over here? Okay, next.
Hello, so my name is Brianna Pearson, and I'm an AmeriCorps PAC Vista that's serving in Reading, Pennsylvania. The unique thing about PAC, like they said before, is that we serve in collaboration with universities and colleges and stuff like that. And the really nice thing about that is that it also forms an extra support system for AmeriCorps through those universities, because a lot of the time they'll have means that can help us with our projects. And another thing I wanted to mention about AmeriCorps in general is that it's not direct service. So the good thing about AmeriCorps is that we're implementing the infrastructure to help eliminate poverty. So it's not just direct service. We're not just going out and picking up trash. We're forming programs that help to eliminate poverty. So it's a long-term investment, not just a short-term investment. And they say that serving a year in AmeriCorps is actually like having 2 years of experience, because you're kind of thrown into this world where you have to create this infrastructure, and coming out of colleges and universities, it's a new thing to do, so you're learning a lot very quickly. So I think we can definitely capitalize on advertising that as well to future community servers.
Thank you so much. I'll come back.
Come on here. Hello. Good afternoon. I'm Maria Santelli. I'm the director of the Center on Conscience and War. I want to speak to the part of your mandate that is reconsidering selective service registration. And as you are in your deliberations, I ask that you please consider equal treatment under the law and consideration for religious freedom and freedom of belief and conscience. This would include things like incentivizing and facilitating equal benefits for all kinds of service, incentives and benefits similar to what is offered by the armed forces, even when one's conscience or one's religious and moral beliefs prevent them from participating with war or contributing in any way to making war possible. Exactly 100 years ago, this country was responsible for the torture and deaths of dozens of our own men, people of conscience whose conscience would not allow them to participate in World War I. There was no option for civilian service at that time. Our organization began on the eve of the U.S. entry into World War II in 1940 to ensure that the same torture and abuse would never happen again to another generation of people of conscience. Our organization worked with the federal government to put in place a civilian public service system so people of conscience could serve and comply with the draft law as their conscience would allow. CPS endured throughout the military draft years. However, CPSers not only are not considered with a similar status as military veterans, they are also not entitled to benefits for their service, no GI Bill for them, and CPSers even often had to pay for their own room and board during the time that they served. In our modern world, we continue to discriminate against people of conscience with respect to selective service registration. All branches of government, the Supreme Court, the presidents, Congress, have affirmed that the primary purpose of registration with selective service is to be prepared for war. This makes even the act of registration a violation of conscience for many people of different faiths and belief. These individuals who cannot participate are punished for life for crimes they were never charged with, prosecuted for, allowed to mount a defense against, let alone convicted of. This punishment endures for their entire life. This is clearly unconstitutional and blatantly un-American. It is our request that you please consider this extrajudicial, unconstitutional punishment of people based on their religious and moral beliefs. In your deliberation, if you decide to retain selective service registration, please consider allowing people to register as conscientious objectors and restoring full rights to people of conscience. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
everybody. My name is Alyssa Slade. I am the program manager for the Senior Corps Foster Grandparent Program of Berks County. So I hope to offer just two quick perspectives. The first being that I'm actually, for lack of a better words, product of somebody else's volunteering journey. So now that I am the program manager for the Foster Grandparent Program, I have come back in contact with my foster grandma from 3rd grade, which is really amazing. As soon as I accepted this position, I saw Barbara Emily Ash on the roster. I'm like, oh my goodness, Barbara Emily, that was mine. And I'm not going to date myself, but that was some time ago. So if that shows anything about the dedication of our volunteers and exactly who they impact, I was able to take my own volunteering journey, and I went to a college that actually does require community service because of this, because I was exposed to this type of dedication at a very young age. So thank you for being here.
I'm Bob Miller. I'm a retired naval officer. Have been involved for a number of years with the teaching offices of the Christian church, broadly speaking, and encouraging an objective reflection on the moral implications of men sending women to war. It's a rich subject, not one that I'm going to define or outline in detail here, but I just would like to lay on your table the category of moral considerations as you regard the matters of service. Service is a moral criterion, a moral category, I should say, perhaps in the criterion of love. And arguably, the draft represents the willingness, we trust, of men to register their availability to fulfill what is an intrinsic moral responsibility from the biblical studies of man in behalf of woman, who has traditionally been the non-combatant. As time has gone on, we've seen gradual moves toward the situation that we have now that needn't be outlined, and obviously a logical and inevitable next consideration is whether women should see this military duty even as a duty, not simply as a volunteer category. And so, as you seek wisdom in probing the consensus of the nation and considering expert and thoughtful and deeply reflective moral contemplation, consider what are the criteria of civilization that are at stake and need to be preserved. With the family being the core institution of civilization, man as male and female, one flesh, no longer two, the components of the family, and the transgenerational engine, if you will, for a civilization. There are some deep issues that need to be considered, and I simply encourage you to take proper account of them. I spoke with one of the preeminent military commanders a number of years ago about the movement of integrating women in active combat forces, and his response was, this needs to be a national debate. I'm just pleased that you are the moderators of that national debate. And the debate, from his point of view, was what kind of civilization do we want to build? Thank you.
Question here? Hi, my name is Aaron Gray. I joined AmeriCorps in 1996. I grew up in Appalachia in Ohio, on the outskirts of a very small town that used to be coal mining country. And going to college was not a possibility for a lot of us. And I worked my way through college and then eventually just ran out of money. And I literally prayed, please let me find an opportunity. The military wasn't an option for me. And I said, if there was only some other way. And right around that time, this new AmeriCorps thing came around. And I said, that sounds like a really nice opportunity. And so I signed up and I moved to Pittsburgh to join the Key Service Corps. Proud to have an alum here. I did a year of service working with kids, and then I was hired by the program. I spent 20 years working with the Key Service Corps. And then October 30th, I became the Assistant Director of PennServe, the Governor's Office of Citizen Service. So AmeriCorps has been a very large part of my life and made college a possibility for me. When we're looking at what is a barrier to service, no one will be surprised to know that it's money. AmeriCorps members spending a full year of service are making around $14,000 a year, 40 hours a week-ish. That's $14,000 a year before taxes. They have to pay taxes on that living allowance. At the end of their term of service, a full-time AmeriCorps member makes, and I quote, $5,815 is an education award. That is $5,815 that is also taxed. During their term of service, many members are able to put their student loans into forbearance. During their term of service, any interest accrues can be paid off when they successfully complete. Any of that interest accrual is taxed. So they're not taking home a lot of money. It's hard for them to do. When our AmeriCorps programs are recruiting, they're telling us it's hard to be in a college campus next to Uber, next to Google, next to Facebook, starting out at, what, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000? No, they're making a lot more than that. AmeriCorps members aren't even breaking 20,000. So it's hard to recruit when the economy, thankfully, is doing better, so it's hard to recruit. And then some of the people who are signing up are saying, you know what, I heard that the budget has been zeroed out. I can't afford to wait to see if you're going to be funded. I need to take a job elsewhere. So if we're really serious about making service possible, we need to think about, can we pay people who want to do this? And can we be committed? We're asking them to commit to a year of service. Can we commit to a budget that tells them, if you sign up for this, you will be paid? For the past 2 years, the budget has come across as zero at first, and then we see if Congress is going to change that or not. So many people that are even getting into the pipeline are backing out because of the uncertainty. So that makes it very difficult for people to commit to a year's service. Thank you.
Yes, sir. My name is Bill Galvin. I live in Relay, Maryland, literally within sight of the first CPS camp, which was the alternative service camp for conscientious objectors during World War II, the very first one to open where conscientious objectors had. Okay, a couple of things I wanted to say. First of all, when I was in college, my college had a required service project for graduation. And I remember, and I want to say, I totally affirm everything that's been said about making service possible and funding it and making it an option for people. I absolutely believe in involuntary service. When I was in college, what I noticed among other students is they were checking off the service requirement, like you check off your math requirement and your language requirement, check off your service requirement. And I ran several service projects while I was in college, and I made it a rule that you couldn't use your service. This is your service project for your college graduation. I never had any problem getting volunteers. If we provide the opportunity for people to get involved, the people do want to serve and get involved, and I think that's really important. The other thing I wanted to speak about a little bit is selective service. I work with Maria at the Center on Conscience and War, and look at selective services registration statistics. I forget if it's exactly 88 or 92% registration. So that means in the range of 10% of the people who are required to register are not registering. And that's even with all the various things to coerce people into registering. And if you look at their statistics, you also see that the majority, and I believe it's over 60%, don't register by going to the post office or going online or something to register. They register because they got registered from applying for a driver's license or applying for college financial aid or something like that. So if you have a law where the majority of people are choosing to not engage it and are only doing it because they're coerced to do it, I think it's important that we look at whether that requirement to require people to register with selective service makes sense in a democratic society. There's much more I could say, but that's the essence of what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Question over here.
Hi, I'm Raquel Capellan, and I am the AmeriCorps Vista intern with Gina Wen here from Reading, PA. I heard a lot of good comments about accessibility. I'm originally from New York, raised in Reading, Pennsylvania, from a lower socioeconomic background, so on and so forth. And so it's kind of like I already know what it's like to be poor and to live in a rough area, in a urban area where the kids don't have it rough. I didn't have it as rough as many others, but it wasn't as easy as others from the suburbs or more affluent areas where it seemed like they already had it all, and then they come to an area where they're learning what poverty is for the first time, right? So I think more of my comment is more on accessibility. I think accessibility is very important, and that's part of my passion for service. And coming back as a Susquehanna University graduate this past May back to Reading, I think it's extremely important to mentor the youth, because if the youth aren't mentored, then all the service dies with everyone who did it already, right? So mentorship is key, and definitely just talking to the youth about their goals and inspiring them. And that's part of the reason why I decided to stay, because I was actually supposed to do AmeriCorps in Minnesota, right? So passion is key, definitely, and not many people understand that when I say it, because they're like, well, where's the money? And I think it's being in this room right now is very inspiring to me, so thank you for everyone that has committed their lives to service, and also remember that accessibility is key. And sometimes for me it's actually hard. I've been really highly debating whether I should put myself in a position where I know that I'm going to have to prepare myself mentally and emotionally to see things from a different perspective of being poor. And I hate saying that either anyway, because I don't consider myself to be a poor person anyway. It depends how you measure your wealth. So I think that access is very important, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to intern with Gina here, and decisions are important to make. So thank you very much, everyone, for your commitment to what you do here. Few but mighty, right? So thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Francis Moore. I'm a 9-year Army veteran as a healthcare specialist. For me, the transition from the military to the civilian sector has actually been kind of difficult, because coming from the service of 9 years as a healthcare specialist, we come to the civilian sector with really nothing that we can 100% take our job from the military and go, okay, we can put it into the system, but not just on the service end. We can't do a lot of things that we've done from the military. Like the training that we've had in the military, we can't use in the civilian sector like we did then. I think with the coming from serving from the military, we need to have some sort of transition, a good transition program for the veterans coming into the civilian sector to be able to take their job, whatever it may be, and be able to integrate it better into the civilian sector. Before I joined the military, I am an Eagle Scout, so scouting actually is a way to help the younger people get into the service, direct service of our country, because like one of the other people that questioned it said, direct service versus indirect. The direct service of going out and having them once a week or once a month going out and cleaning the side of the road to help make our country look better, versus just sitting there and going, well, I don't want to do this. Getting into those type of activities, getting into the Boys and Girls Clubs, those things help us get into getting the youth involved into service at a younger age. Then as I got older, I served as a volunteer firefighter in my local community before I joined the military. So from the age of 14 to 18, 19 years old, I served as a volunteer, either junior firefighter, active firefighter once I got old enough to do it, and also a fire police officer for directing traffic. So it's just getting the kids out there, letting them know that even at the age of 14, if they wanted to get into service, they can serve their local fire departments if they have a junior organization. So helping the different companies out there get involved, fire, EMS, getting that training out there and even into the schools. Because when I was in high school, they were surprised how many people you could get out of what most people would understand as a box ambulance, because that was our rescue unit. We had like 14 people in the back of that. So even just doing that for a mock car accident, you get to be able to see, the school gets to see how that would affect. So just having these ideas out there, being able to transfer stuff from different areas so that we can use it in the benefit of our people in the future. Thank you.
Avril, back here, David says something he wants to say.
Oh, wow. Wow, I got put on blast real quick. Hi, my name is David D'Alessio. I'm a 18-year veteran in the U.S. Army. I did 7 years active duty, and I've been in 11 years in the active reserves, 2 years looking towards retirement. It's going to be great. So I come from a different perspective than a lot of you all. It seems like we have a very big representation of different types of services outside of the military, and that's really wonderful, and I'm so grateful that you guys actually exist, that you actually have the time to go and do these things. But I want to talk about my background real fast, because some people had mentioned lower income or inner city environments and things like that. So if coming to look at me, you wouldn't believe that I come from a very poor environment, inner city environment. There's no money where I come from to do this type of service that you guys are all talking about. I would not be able to fund myself. When I went to college the first time, I had to fund myself, and there was no time. I was working 40 hours a week plus going to school. All right, there was no time for service, and I think when you talk about service, you have to incentivize it. I joined the Army to really get away from a situation that probably would have ended very poorly, where you all would have been supporting me in a small box for probably the rest of my life. So I left a situation, and the Army provided me that gateway out of a negative situation turned into a positive. And through military service and service to this nation has given me everything. It's given me the money for my education. I'm currently a student at HAC at 43. It's wonderful. It's given me a wonderful wife that I met in the military, 3 wonderful children, all right, and really turned me into a productive member of society. And that's what service provided for me. So how do we incentivize it, right? Whether it be military or whether it be other means of service. When I joined the Army, because somebody was talking about funding, where it's $14,000 a year. When I joined the military, I made $800 a month. I got paid on the 1st and the 15th. By the 5th, I was eating ramen, all right, because I was out of money. And that's just the way life was. When I had my first child in the military, we didn't have money for food. We went to WIC. So I benefited from a WIC program while serving in the military. So I just want to put things in perspective, all right, for y'all. So if we want to provide service, we want to get people involved in service, there has to be some sort of incentive. All right? If you want somebody that has muscles and is willing to learn, you got to catch them young. You have to make them understand. You take kids from the inner city, they don't have an outlook on life. They don't have a future. They've only been told that they're nothing. I was always told I was nothing. Okay? And I didn't find out I was somebody until my 4th week of basic training, and I was put in a leadership position. All right? So you must think about that. If you're putting this together and you're trying to get young people to provide service to their nation, there has to be some sort of incentive behind it. Because if you don't do it, you're not going to get it. All right? And the way I see service, national service, whether it be military or other service organizations, is a conduit to get people out of negative situations and put them into a positive situation. That should be what you think about. When we talk about the military draft and selective service, that's a strategic thing that probably does need to exist in some way, with some sort of exception for people that have religious or moral objections to fighting in a war, right? Well, incentivize selective service as well. There should be not a different road. So you're a conscientious objector, there should be a road to help support those people, because as every world war that we fought in, there's just a big necessity for providing services CONUS to the men and women that are going and fighting overseas. Okay? That's all I have. Just think about those things, okay? And I really appreciate you coming.
My name's Shane Gallagher, 10-year veteran also. I'd like to just also echo the same thing. I served, was Army vet, loved it, best time of my life. We do need people back here serving still, so the conscientious objectors, I fully support. If you don't believe in it, then serve in a different way, but serve. My biggest point, though, is we talked about taking care of the veterans afterwards also. 10-year service. I was an infantry guy. I got out. I am unemployed right now. And I've been told I'm not qualified for multiple jobs. I will even call out a certain company, I won't call their name out, but a piece of equipment that we used in the military, I was in charge of for my brigade. The expert, they told me I'm not qualified for them. All right? So that's one of my biggest things is the service wants to be there. Let's reward them and take care of them afterwards also. That's all I have. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. I think it's afternoon. I'm Margie Groy. I'm from Lebanon, and I serve with RSVP, which is Retired Senior Volunteer Program, and the commission was at our office yesterday in Camp Hill, so I thank them all for coming there. I've been with RSVP for a few years, and we place senior volunteers in the community in service in nonprofits, and people like Nancy at the VA, where we have about 70 volunteers who work with the patients. We serve in many other capacities in the community with Meals on Wheels and delivering to seniors and all the nonprofits. So we looked at those numbers. About 48 million, they said, are aging, a baby boomer population, which unfortunately I'm a part of. I think I am still kicking, but a part of. And we're going to see that population of baby boomers aging now in the next 10 to 15 years is going to be the largest population. So if we're at 48 million now, that population is going to increase by leaps and bounds. So when I look at that population and replacing our volunteers at the VA, we just had Bob Boyer, who was 93 at the VA, sat at the front desk every day in a wheelchair, and he passed away a few months ago at the VA. And he was at the VA serving at the front desk, and everybody knew Bob at the VA. And my 80 and 90-year-old volunteers that we're losing every day, we need to replace those with the baby boomers. And some of our baby boomers are coming out and retiring and going to work a second job. And they're living longer, and they're going to work another 20 years. So we need to replace those volunteers, because those nonprofits and those agencies that depend on us in all of those communities across the nation right now, they're going to be left with a big payroll if we don't replace those volunteers. So we need to do that by better recruitment and support with RSVP and Senior Corps and foster grandparents and everybody else. And that's my senior part of my spiel. But I wanted to talk, my heartstring goes out to the youth. I had the good fortune of growing up in a great family. My dad was in the Air Force, and he had 5 girls, and we didn't go in the service. He was waiting for his boy. But I had a great childhood because I went to a private school, and my parents were at the same school in Lebanon Catholic, and I went there, and my children went there. So 3 generations of private school, and at our school we were instilled with service, and we had to do service hours, not just senior service hours, but every year we had to do service hours, and that was a requirement for graduation. I know a lot of the schools now today are doing that senior service hours. When we look at going into the schools and the military, what I'm thinking about is I encouraged my daughter, who was going to college in Philadelphia, to go into the Air Force. And she signed up for ROTC 2 years ago in Philadelphia. She was at a college in Philadelphia. And I encouraged her to do that, and she signed up, and she was very excited about it. She drove herself a couple mornings a week to St. Joe's in Philly until she got injured, and then she had to drop out of the ROTC. She now transferred, she was at HAC, and now she's transferred to Florida, a college I'll be flying to tomorrow morning in Florida to see her. And she's at a college in Florida in St. Augustine that does not have ROTC, or she might have continued it. So one of my soapboxes is the Army ROTC is in many, many colleges, but we don't see a lot of the other services in the colleges. If she would have continued, she was not able to. But as far as volunteerism and your youth and reaching out to your youth, that starts in your family. And my heart goes out to the girl that spoke over there and the gentleman that just spoke in the back. Because in Lebanon right now, there's if you go into Lebanon inner city, we're having a huge influx. It's not a I don't want to say poverty-stricken community, but we have our challenges, and we just had 500 students come into our public school system in Lebanon County from the hurricane in Puerto Rico. and they're really struggling. And when I heard the two girls up there talking about how they got into the service they got into, and whether it was the AmeriCorps or the service, you have recruiters that go into the high schools, and it's kind of intimidating to go up to that table, like they said, and be recruited into the service. That's very overwhelming and intimidating. And I think we need more of these young people that served in the service or AmeriCorps, like these, to go into the middle schools right now and the high schools and talk to them about the AmeriCorps, talk to them about service, talk to them about the military. Because you can have the recruiters and some of us old folks go in there, but they're going to relate, these young people are going to relate to the young people that are talking to them. And like Herman back here who talked, he's the kind of people that we need to go into the schools and talk to the kids about serving in AmeriCorps and some of these other youth, and not old people, unfortunately, not recruiters, which can be intimidating to them. We all know right now in our country we're having a terrible problem in our schools. And like I said, I came from a great family, and I'm very fortunate, but not everybody has that situation. Right now in Lebanon County, with the influx and the diversification, we have a lot of the Hispanic and Dominican and everybody else coming in, and they don't understand it. It's great for all of us to talk about that, but like the girl over there spoke, they don't understand, and they don't have families pushing them. I pushed my kids all my life to volunteer and go to college or to serve. Those families coming in the country right now, the immigrants, the diversified population, they don't have the parental advice and that they're getting. So we need some better getting into the schools and the middle schools with the AmeriCorps, the military, people that have served that are younger, and get out there and touch our youth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One and last one over there.
Good afternoon. I just want to thank the Commission first for giving us all this opportunity. And I also want to thank everybody here for their service. I'm Dusty Durand. I served in the military. I served in my community. I served with my church. Service is just part of who I am, and I hope what I share the Commission takes heed to. And that is that everybody wants to be part of something. I think everybody here who volunteers, who serves, wants to be part of something bigger and greater than themselves. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. And the best part about that is the people you work with and that you learn, and the different experiences you have with those people who are serving alongside you. And I think all of us will say that. But service is learned. It's learned. Therefore, in order for us to increase service, we need to teach it. Service needs to be taught. And that's the one way we're going to see an influx of other people who are able to serve within their communities and so forth. It also must be incentivized, like we've heard before. It has to be incentivized. So if we teach it, we incentivize it, and then the next thing we need to do is we need to honor it and reward it. And if we do those same things that we do in other areas, I think that you'll see that the American population will be part of that solution that we've all been talking about and listening to. Thanks.
I guess I get cleanup, so to speak. First, thanks for taking the time to come out and do this. I have 34 years in government service. I actually served with CIA, with State Department Diplomatic Security Service, and then with DIA. In addition to that, 10 years with the Navy Reserve while I was serving as a civilian in government. And 15 years ago, I also started a 501c3 nonprofit, Galaxy Explorers, which to date has put 45,000 kids through STEM programs, after-school programs, summer camps, things like that. So I have a perspective on service. And 3 quick points. Number 1, you have an extraordinary challenge that you're facing, and you're not going to rectify it in the next couple of years. I mean, this is a generational challenge because we're in an environment globally where globalization is actually degrading the nation-state structure. And we've seen responses to that. We've seen a response from China. We've seen Russia, and they clamp down in an authoritarian fashion in response to that. But that's happening. People in survey after survey, people, kids in particular, care more about regional issues, climate change and things like that, than they do national generational issues. So you're facing this. I mean, even kids which form friendships online, with kids all over the world, see that structure as well as they see their own friends, locally. So you have a dynamic, different environment that you're going to have to face. In addition to that, if you look at the Department of Labor trends, we have people that are changing jobs frequently. Very frequently. So the average kid is like 6, 7, 8 jobs by the time they're in their mid-30s. When you can refer to kids in their mid-30s, you've seen your day, so to speak. But that's a big thing. It was a big thing for us in government because we saw in the military and in DIA, in CIA as well, a number of people, and the problem isn't people coming in. The problem is leaving. The problem is after 5 to 7 years, there's an exodus. So I got students backed up, in the corridor waiting to try and get into government service. And some of the jobs that I know that I was in, we had 600 applicants for the job. One government agency, we had 300,000 applicants a year. That's a lot of applicants, right? So it's not necessarily people coming in, it's how fast you're losing them. And that's something that's got to be fixed internally. That's got to be fixed within if you look at the surveys, and I think that's great that we're all doing surveys and have been for the last decades, but we've not shown a lot of progress. We've shown points progress, but not a heck of a lot. So those internal surveys, a little more pressure has to be put on the agencies to rectify the problems that they have that are causing people to leave. It's expensive. It's expensive to have someone come in, train them, just when they really start hitting running strides, 3, 4, 5 years, and they start leaving. This is an expensive cycle to redo. So we want to get out of that. All right, the environment. To rectify this. I agree with Dusty in the sense that education, whom I don't know, we didn't do this, but education is sort of a key. We have got to start with civics and, our system of governance and learning about democracy and our Constitution. My students know more about the Constitution and its impact on national security than most of my colleagues ever did in the Defense Department. How bizarre is that? I mean, it's sort of crazy, but we need to educate our kids. Our kids have to come up with the idea of service. They have to understand what it means to be a member of a democracy, and they have to understand their role in it. Many other countries do this. We don't. Not to any degree. So leave with that one thing. Start with the kids. It's going to be a generational change if you want it to be long-lasting and stay. Thank you.
Avril, I have a question. And since we've heard so much about service, I'd like to put this question to you all, and maybe we could do it by a show of hands. One of the questions that we are considering, as you've heard, is national service. Should it be a requirement, or should it remain a voluntary endeavor? And why don't we consider this question only in the context of national service, not military, because that's a different kind of a thing. By a show of hands, who believes that there ought to be a requirement of national service for our youth? How many believe it ought to remain a voluntary endeavor? There's a reason we came to Harrisburg today. You've given us all a tremendous amount to think about. I can't thank you enough for all of you who are members of the military, AmeriCorps, for being with us, for sharing your stories. Thank you so much. Avril?
Just to add to Tom, I know all of you have a lot of things to do in the course of your day, busy lives, and I just cannot tell you what a gift it is for all of you to come out and to talk to us. It means an enormous amount to us. It's the only way that we're going to get to, decent answers on the questions that we've been asked to do, and it's a real gift. And it's so inspiring to hear from all of you. It's just makes me proud to be part of this country. Thank you so much. Thank you very, very much.